fears, the fear of failure, etc. Did that ever constrain your dream of becoming an entrepreneur? Was that ever a question in your mind? Akshita, I'll start by asking you, and how did you cope with that? How did you deal with that?
Yes. So I think that one of the best decisions, even though my parents put us in, my parents cared more about sports day than report day, just to give you an understanding. But one of the best extracurriculars they put me in was theater. So then, like I stood outside before entering and I saw the roster and I saw who was interviewing me. And I was like, oh my God, that's the imposter syndrome creeping in. Just fight that today. Walk into the room. You belong here. And
you do belong here. Each one of you belongs here, and this is something a lot of women, and I personally have felt the imposter syndrome as well. There's this self-doubt that's sticking in your mind, and I want to understand from each one of you your mechanism of dealing with that.
Yeah. So like I was saying, I think that I had once you've done theater for a number of years, you know how to wear a mask. So then I'm like, okay, now I'm entering, and I think that's something I remind myself of when I get nervous is like, you're here representing Mayurbhanj. There are people, you have this opportunity because you also have privilege, because someone is able to find you online, because you speak the right language, because you dress a certain way, because your education. So remember that when you're here, it's an opportunity to kick the door open and wider for a number of people who aren't able to have their stories and voices heard. So every time I come for an event like this, or I go somewhere, I remember why I'm doing it, and that purpose, I think, gives me the strength to overcome any of the mind chatter.
Lachic, what were the fears? Do you still have them? How do you deal with it? And what is it that you would like to say to other young women who are looking at the possibility of starting up, but somehow shrink themselves into little boxes because they're unsure and uncertain?
I think at the end of the day, if you're, certain of what you want and your intentions are right, and you're doing things that, you can go to bed and sleep in peace, and you're doing the right thing, I think there's nothing that can stop you. Yes, I have been through multiple moments of doubt. When I moved back and I started construction, I was 26. So everybody around me doubted me, so that didn't help either. But I knew what I was doing. And even if you're the only person who believes in yourself, at the end of the day, you're answerable to yourself.
Yeah.
And if you're honest and you know you're doing the right thing, people come around. And you just have to continue doing it, and you have to consistently do it with the right intentions and the right motive. I think that's what's
that's so beautifully said, because very often we seek external validation, and in fact that is what we live for. But at the end of the day, as you said, we're accountable to ourselves, to our own conscience. We're answerable to our calling, and each one of you is a representation of that. Leesa, I want to understand from you, what is the vision that you now have as far as Nirgun is concerned? Where would you like to take this? And what impact do you believe you're making in the lives of the women that you're dealing with today?
Yeah. Nirguna, the way I have visualized it, the path I have followed is the holistic development of a community. So in a holistic development, what I always say to my customers, don't look at a sari as a product. It is a service to a community. Talking the tradition, the culture, the local motives, the local rituals of that place. When I say Sambalpuri sari, we're talking about Sambalpuri people, right? Similarly, when I went to the interior recesses of Odisha, and suddenly one day I realized, there is something called Dhalapathar close to Bhubaneswar, I don't know.
Yeah.
And that is a sari, I'm wearing that sari. We revived the sari. After 100 years, it was lost in time.
Yeah.
So those kind of things, the revival of weaves, documentation. For last 8 years, we were doing video documentation of local culture, local tradition, local weaves, their motives. So somebody have to preserve our tradition, because that is where India lies.
Yes, and that is how brands are built. Brands are not built on the strength of just the product alone. Brands are built on the strength of the stories that they represent. And what a wonderful sari you're wearing here, Leesa, today. So thank you very much for sharing the story of the sari that you're wearing. But Talha, let me ask you, what is it that you hope to do with the foundation? What is the kind of impact that you would like to make?
I think what we realized, we thought we were trying to get jobs, but we realized that we are effectively making a systemic change. Because it's not just, in Kashmir, J&K, usually there's not much of a private sector, so there's only government sector. So just the shift from government sector to private jobs, that itself, people have to get used to it. Secondly, women moving out, because we can't take all the jobs there right now. So people moving out, mobility, are they willing to move out, insecurities, etc. That's another. So there are a lot of, I think what I realize, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint.
Yes.
So you have to kind of stick with it. It's going to be very slow because it has to be systemic change rather than just the few jobs you get. So I think you have to be very aware of that and not get discouraged. Keep encouraging yourself and pivot as and when required to make that.
Oh, absolutely. You have to have the agility and the dynamism. I want to end by asking each one of you, and I'll start with you, Akshita, what we just heard there from Talha as well, that, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. You've got to keep at it. So I'm going to get each one of you to pass the baton on to the other. And the one thing that you believe that we as a society, as civil society, can do to ensure that we see more women participate in the workforce, in the formal economy, and the one thing that you believe the government needs to do.
I think that, there's this idea that the focus is on women's education, and if we focus on women's education, that's going to, make sure that they're going to join the, labor force. But actually, we know that's not true. There were more women working in jobs, public and private sector in the 80s than there are today. Women are getting educated and choosing not to work. So I think that we need to take a hard look at who is framing the rules of society and work, and what is, if that's working for women. I mean, I've been working for 7 years, and this is the first job I have. I'm still working in the corporate sector and doing both. But this is the first job I have that there are sanitary napkins in the bathrooms at Dasra, the nonprofit I work in Bombay. And that's really important, right? I mean, something so small is like, like creating safe spaces for women at work, making sure that work from home, hybrid work, whether that works or not. And also, I think what's important is when we talk about women at work, we focus on urban women and jobs which are, say, white-collar jobs, and we completely disregard rural, rural women from, Dalit communities, indigenous communities. When we're talking about women, we have to also talk about transgender women and their rights.
Inclusion in all its,
I think you said it there.
Absolutely. Lachic, very quickly, in 10 seconds, the one thing that you would like us to take away from this conversation.
I think as an entrepreneur and as like a woman entrepreneur, the most important thing and the biggest challenge is usually finance. And I think the government really needs to work towards providing more financial support to women entrepreneurs. We hear about a lot of schemes, but on ground, we know the reality. So I think that is the biggest support.
Access to capital, access to finance. Well made. That point is well taken. Leesa, very quickly, the one thing.
Yeah. Apart from government support, but I want to tell every one of us, let's buy a handloom sari every year.
Okay, everyone, make a commitment to buy a handloom sari, and that will go a long way. Talha, I'll end with you.
I think what we need to do is in our workspaces, I think we need to really actually indoctrinate the fact that women have issues, all of the issues. We put a lot of policies together, but implementation and execution, I think if we focused more on that than adding just policies, I think that would be really the key.
Policies need to be made for people. People should not have to customize themselves to policies. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for our women achievers here, kick-starting She Shakti, Swayam Shakti, representing the many faces of India. We wish you the very best of luck, and thank you so much for joining us here this afternoon. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Anand, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies. Please stay there, and I'm going to request Shireen to present a small token of our appreciation and for their effort that they've taken.